On my late mother's birthday, my husband took me to the cemetery. He led me to the family plot and said, "Your mother is waiting for you. Your place is here now, beside her. Goodbye." Then he left, abandoning me to freeze by my mother's grave. But he didn't know my mother had left a letter for me beneath the headstone. When I read it, I smiled for the first time that day. My husband had no idea what awaited him in the morning. Hello. Write in the comments where you're from. Don't forget to subscribe and hit like. Enjoy the story. Dan was the one who suggested going to the cemetery. I was surprised. Lately, he'd been so distant, buried in his financial troubles, that I didn't expect such thoughtfulness from him. I put on my old gray coat, the one my mother always said looked nice on me, and we got into the car. He barely spoke on the way there. I assumed he was grieving too. When I tried to take his hand, his fingers were tense like steel rods, and he quickly pulled away. He muttered something about needing to check on the countryside house, though there was no reason to. I figured he just didn't want to show his sadness. How naive I was. We drove in silence. Outside, a dull November landscape drifted by, bare trees, a gray sky heavy with rain or sleet. The cold seeped through the car's interior. I shivered, and without looking at me, Dan turned up the heat. That small, mechanical gesture, so emotionless, felt strange, but I brushed it off. Today was my mother's day. I needed to focus on her. When we reached the cemetery gates, he turned off the engine. "Leave your purse and phone. Why bring them here? Let's be with her, just us, no worldly distractions," he said in a flat, lifeless tone. I nodded. His logic sounded eerie, but I was too caught up in grief to argue. I just wanted to reach my mother's grave, lay the flowers that were in the back seat, and talk to her for a bit, like I used to. We got out of the car. The wind hit my face, sharp and icy, carrying bits of snow that stung my skin. Dan took out 2 red carnations, bright as drops of blood on the gray snow, and handed them to me. He walked ahead, taking long, determined strides along the frozen path. I struggled to keep up. His back looked straight, stiff, distant. There was our family plot. The fence we'd painted that summer had already dulled. The new granite headstone gleamed faintly, my mother's warm smile etched forever into the photo. I laid the flowers on the cold stone. A lump rose in my throat. I wanted to speak, but no words came. I just stared at her face in silence. Dan stood beside me. I expected him to put his arm around me, to say something comforting. But he just stood there. The cold radiating from him wasn't just from the weather. A minute passed. Then another. The silence became unbearable. The wind howled between the graves. Then he spoke. His voice was calm, almost detached, like a newscaster reading the weather report. "You know, Tisa, I've been thinking a lot lately. About us. About your mother." I turned to him, hoping for warmth in his eyes. But they were empty, 2 shards of gray ice. "Your mother is waiting for you," he continued evenly. "Your place is here now, beside her. Goodbye." At first, I couldn't grasp his words. My mind refused to process them. It had to be some cruel joke. He just wanted to scare me. I stared at him, waiting for a laugh, a smirk, something. But he didn't laugh. He turned and walked away, fast and confident, just as he'd come. "Dan." I shouted after him. "Dan, what are you doing?" "Wait." He didn't look back. His figure grew smaller in the distance. I ran after him, stumbling over the frozen ground. The icy air burned my lungs. "Dan, stop. Please." By the time I reached the cemetery gates, he was already in the car. The engine roared to life. I rushed to the door, yanked the handle, locked. I pounded on the window with my fists, but he didn't even glance at me. He just stared straight ahead. Then the car rolled forward. I ran alongside, hitting the cold metal, screaming his name until my voice cracked. The car sped up, the red taillights shrinking to 2 glowing dots, then disappearing behind the bend. Silence fell. That heavy, suffocating cemetery silence, now filled with the echo of the engine and the howl of the freezing wind in my ears. I was alone. In my gray coat, without a purse, without money, without a phone, stranded in the middle of a vast snowy cemetery. For the first few minutes, I just stood there, unable to move. The shock was so strong I couldn't even feel the cold. One thought kept circling in my head: this is a mistake. He'll come back. He'll realize what he's done and return. I stared down the road, waiting. 5 minutes. 10. Nothing. No cars. No people. And then the full horror of it hit me. The cold pierced through my coat, stabbing into my skin with 1,000 icy needles. My fingers went numb. I shoved them into my pockets, but it didn't help. I hadn't dressed for this. I'd planned to stay maybe half an hour, then get back to the warm car. I looked around. The nearest road was at least 2 miles away, across the cemetery, then over a field. In this weather, dressed like this, I'd never make it. I'd freeze before I got there. Panic rose in my throat, cold and sticky. I was going to die here. He'd left me to die. On my mother's birthday. At her grave, despair crushed me. I stumbled back to my mother's headstone, not even knowing why. I didn't have the strength to cry or scream. I just knelt before the cold granite, pressed my forehead against her portrait. Mom. Mom, what do I do? I whispered. And in that moment, when it felt like everything was over, a memory surfaced. A fragment of a conversation from before she died. She had been so weak then, her voice barely audible. I sat by her bed, holding her frail hand. Tisa, she whispered, if one day you're in terrible trouble, if you feel completely alone, know this: I left you one last secret. It's right there. By my stone. You'll understand. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I assumed it was just the rambling of a dying woman. My mother's secrets. What secrets could she possibly have had? Her life had always been an open book. But now her words echoed in my mind like a warning bell. One last secret. By her stone. A faint, desperate hope pushed me to my feet. I began to examine the monument. Smooth, polished granite. No cracks, no hidden panels. I ran my frozen fingers over the carved letters of her name. Nothing. I walked around it. Nothing. Maybe she didn't mean the headstone itself, but the ground around it. I started brushing away the thin layer of snow at the base. The soil was hard as rock. My numb fingers scraped against the frozen dirt and tiny pebbles. Then suddenly, one of the stones pressed into the earth near the base shifted slightly under my touch. My heart started pounding so hard it hurt. I dug my nails into it. They broke instantly, but I didn't feel the pain. I pulled, wiggled, pried, and finally, it came loose. Beneath it, in a small hollow, was a tightly wrapped bundle made of waterproof material. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it. I unwrapped it and found a folded piece of paper inside. A letter. It was my mother's handwriting, large, slightly slanted to the right, so familiar and dear. I began to read. My dear Tisa, if you're reading this, then the worst has happened. It means I was right to be afraid, and you're in danger. Forgive me for not telling you everything before. I wanted to protect you. There's no time for explanations now. Just do exactly as I say. Here's a name and a phone number. His name is Austin Stoll. Call him. Immediately. Tell him who you are. He'll understand and help you. Below were a name and a phone number. And at the very end, there was a note, circled several times. He swore to me. He'll protect you as if you were his own daughter. Trust no one else, Tisa. Especially not your sister, Hannah. Why Hannah? My younger sister, who cried the loudest at the funeral, who called me every day after Mom's death. What could that mean? But I had no time to think. The cold was merciless, biting deep into my bones, stiffening every muscle. If I stayed here, I'd die. The letter in my hand wasn't just hope, it was a command. I tucked it under my sweater to keep it safe and forced myself to stand up. My legs wouldn't obey me. They felt like two wooden sticks. I took one step, then another. I started walking away from the grave, from the only familiar place in that frozen hell. I walked toward the gates, toward the road, toward survival. Each step was agony. The wind hurled sharp snowflakes into my face, blinding me. I stumbled, fell onto the frozen ground, got up, and kept going. In my head, one thought, one name pounded over and over: Austin Stoll. I repeated it like a prayer. Who was he? Why had my mother trusted him with my life? And why had she warned me about Hannah? Questions swarmed in my mind, but I pushed them away. All that mattered now was surviving, reaching a phone. The cemetery seemed endless. Rows of crosses and monuments blurred into one gray, dreary haze. Finally, I saw a break ahead, the gates. Beyond them was a road leading to the highway. I gathered my remaining strength and hurried forward. When I reached the road, I stopped, gasping for air. My lungs burned. I had no idea which direction to go, so I walked toward where I thought the city lights might be. I trudged along the roadside, shivering from the cold. A few cars passed, splashing me with icy slush, but none stopped. I must have looked insane, disheveled, in a filthy coat, eyes wild. Maybe 40 minutes passed, maybe an hour. I'd lost all sense of time. My toes were completely numb. I realized I couldn't go much farther. Then, about 300 meters ahead, I saw a light. A tiny neon sign, cafe. It looked like a mirage. I ran toward it, not feeling my feet. The door resisted at first, then swung open with a bell chime. I stumbled inside, overwhelmed by warmth, light, and the smell of fresh pastries. The cafe was nearly empty. An elderly couple sat at one table, and a young waitress leaned on the counter, bored. She looked at me in shock as I approached, clutching the counter to stay upright. Please, can I use your phone? I croaked. My voice barely worked. I'm begging you. It's a matter of life and death. The girl stared at me with a mix of pity and fear. She probably thought I'd escaped from something terrible. She nodded silently and handed me her phone. My fingers were like stiff sticks. I fumbled inside my sweater for my mother's letter. The paper was damp and cold. I looked at the number and tried to dial it on the touch screen, but my fingers kept slipping, pressing the wrong digits. Finally, on the 5th try, I got it right and pressed call. It rang. Once. Twice. My heart pounded in my throat. What if he didn't answer? What if the number was old? What if? On the 3rd ring, someone picked up. A man's voice, deep and calm, said one word. Speaking. Hello, I whispered. My name is Tisa. I'm the daughter of Hetty Sisley. There was silence. Only a few seconds, but so tense it felt like I could hear the electricity humming in the lamps. Then the same voice, but sharper now, urgent, commanding, said, Where are you? There was no surprise in his tone, no hesitation. Just a terrible, consuming urgency. As if he'd been waiting for this call his entire life. I'm at a cafe by the old cemetery. Just outside the city, I stammered, not even sure where exactly I was. I know that place. Don't move. Don't go anywhere. I'll be there in 20 minutes. At most. And he hung up. I handed the phone back to the stunned waitress, whispering a thank you. She nodded and poured hot water into a glass. Drink, she said. I took a few sips. The heat burned my lips, but it spread through me like salvation. I sat by the window and stared at the road. 20 minutes. He said 20 minutes. I glanced at the clock on the wall. Every minute dragged like an hour. I didn't know who I was waiting for. Who was this man? Why did he sound like the world was collapsing? I kept rereading my mother's letter over and over. He'll protect you as if you were his own daughter. Exactly 18 minutes later, a large black SUV pulled up to the cafe, the kind of expensive car I'd only seen a few times in our city. The door opened, and a man stepped out. Tall, silver-haired, dressed in a perfectly tailored dark coat. He looked about 60. He didn't glance around or search for me. He walked straight to the cafe door, as if he knew exactly where I was. He came inside. Our eyes met. There was so much worry and pain in his gaze. He walked up to my table. "Tisa?" he asked quietly. I just nodded. I couldn't speak. He took off his coat and draped it over my shoulders. It was heavy, warm, and smelled faintly of expensive cologne. "Come on. You need to get warm." He left a large bill on the counter without even looking at the waitress, then gently guided me toward the door, holding my elbow. The car was very warm. Heated leather seats. He helped me in, buckled my seatbelt like I was a child, and handed me a thermos. "Hot tea. With honey and ginger. Drink." I took small sips, feeling life slowly return to my frozen body. We drove in silence. I studied his profile, sharp, strong features, calm yet commanding. He didn't look at me, but I could feel his attention fixed entirely on me. We entered the most upscale part of the city, where mansions hid behind high gates. The car stopped at a set of massive wrought iron gates that opened silently, revealing a vast pine-covered estate. The house ahead looked like a modern castle, glass and stone, elegant yet imposing. Inside, everything was quiet and still. A woman in a maid's uniform appeared, silently taking our wet coats. Austin, I was sure it was him, led me into a large living room with a crackling fireplace. He settled me into a deep armchair and covered me with a blanket. "You're safe now, Tisa," he said, sitting across from me. "No one will hurt you here." I stared at the fire, at this stranger who somehow felt trustworthy, and the tears that had been frozen inside me finally broke free. I cried silently, tears soaking the wool blanket. He waited patiently for me to calm down. "Your mother, Hetty," he said softly when I fell silent. "She was my first love. We were very young. Life pulled us apart, but I never forgot her. A year ago, she found me. Told me she was sick. And she made me promise, if anything happened to her, I would find you and take care of you. No matter what." I listened, and slowly, it all started to make sense. That's why my mother had trusted him. Old love. A vow. I felt a wave of relief. I wasn't alone. I had someone, a protector, loyal to my mother's word. "Thank you," I whispered. "I don't know what I would have done without you." "My husband, Dan," I began telling him everything. My words tumbled out, confused, scattered, about how distant Dan had been lately, about his debts, about the trip to the cemetery, his cold, terrifying words. I poured out all the fear and pain I'd been holding in since that morning. Austin listened without interrupting. His face grew darker, more tense. His hands gripped the armrests so hard his knuckles turned white. When I got to the part where Dan drove away, leaving me to freeze at the grave, he suddenly raised his hand. "Stop, Tisa. That's enough." I froze, startled. His face was twisted in anguish. He looked at me like my words were physically hurting him. She didn't tell you everything," he said slowly, searching for the right words. "The promise I made to her, it wasn't just a friend's vow. It was something more." He stood, walked to the window, and stared out at the snowy garden. His shoulders were tense. "When Hetty found me last year, she told me a truth she had hidden all her life. The truth about you, Tisa." He turned around. His eyes were wet with tears. "The vow I made was a father's vow. I'm your biological father, Tisa." His words hung in the warm air of the room. They didn't crash down or explode, they just sank into the silence like water into dry soil. The fire crackled, sending up a spray of sparks. I looked at him, at Austin, and suddenly noticed details I'd missed before. The lines of his cheekbones, the shape of his eyes. Something achingly familiar, something I'd seen in the mirror 1,000 times without understanding why. The man I'd always called my father died when I was 20. He was kind, quiet, an engineer at a factory. I loved him deeply. But now my entire life, all 35 years of it, felt like a story someone had told me, and I had simply believed it. I didn't cry. The tears had been left behind, at the cemetery. Inside, there was only emptiness, deep, ringing emptiness. I sat wrapped in the blanket, staring at him. And he looked back at me with all the pain and tenderness I had longed to see in Dan's eyes for years. He told me everything, about his youthful romance with my mother, bright and brief, about how he left for college in another state, how her parents disapproved and must have hidden her letters from him. She thought he'd abandoned her. He thought she'd forgotten him. She married a good man willing to raise another's child as his own. Austin built a successful life, married too, but, as he said, never loved anyone the same way again. My mother found him after learning she was ill. Not to ask for money or help, but to tell him the truth and make him swear an oath. She was afraid for you, Tisa, he said, his voice trembling. She saw through Dan. She felt something rotten in him. She told me he had this desperate greed in him, something dangerous. But she didn't know what to do. She feared that if she tried to make you leave him, you wouldn't listen, and he'd only hurt you more. So she came up with this plan. The letter. Her last attempt to protect you. I listened, and the emptiness inside me began to change, filling not with warmth, but with something sharp, cold, and crystal clear. Anger. All that self-pity, all the helpless despair I'd felt at the cemetery, burned away. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. My husband hadn't simply left me. He'd carried out the very nightmare my mother had feared most. He'd left me to die, on her birthday. That anger felt like a steel rod growing straight through my spine. I stood up straighter and threw off the blanket. I need to go home, I said firmly. The voice was mine, but it sounded different, steady, cold, certain. Austin looked at me with concern. Tisa, that's not a good idea. We don't know if he's there. He could be dangerous. I'm not going there to fight him, I said. I just want to get my things and look him in the eyes. I want him to see that I didn't freeze to death. That I'm alive. I won't let him think he's won. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. There was respect in his eyes now. All right. But you're not going alone. Tomorrow morning. With my lawyer. That night, I stayed in a guest bedroom bigger than my entire apartment. I lay on a massive bed with silk sheets, staring at the ceiling. I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the day in my mind, every word Dan said, every movement, that icy calmness. And now I understood, it hadn't been a moment of madness. It was calculated, deliberate. He'd wanted me gone. Maybe even dead out there in the cold. In the morning, over breakfast, Austin introduced me to his lawyer. His name was Bryce Hertz, a man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a calm, professional manner. He didn't ask unnecessary questions. Austin must have already told him everything. Tisa, he said, shaking my hand firmly. My job is to ensure your safety and protect your legal rights. We'll go to your apartment. If your husband is there, I'll handle all communication. Don't engage with him. If he's not, we'll assess the situation and decide what to do next. His composure steadied me. I wasn't alone anymore. I was protected. We drove to my building in Bryce's car, the same luxury model Dan had driven yesterday. But today everything was different. I wasn't a victim being taken to her death. I was going to reclaim my life. As we pulled up, I saw Dan's car parked in our spot. So he was home. My heart clenched for a second, but anger quickly pushed fear aside. We took the elevator to our floor. I stopped in front of the door, my door. My hands trembled slightly as I reached into the pocket of the coat Austin's housekeeper had given me. I always kept a spare key in a hidden pocket. Dan didn't know about it. I'm ready, Bryce said quietly, standing beside me. I slid the key into the lock and turned it. Once. Twice. The door clicked open. I pushed it and stepped inside. Silence. I had braced myself for shouting, a confrontation, maybe Dan drunk on the couch. But the apartment was empty. Hollow. I walked into the living room and froze. The wall where the big plasma TV had hung was bare. Cables dangled from the socket. His gaming computer was gone, the one that took up a whole corner. His shelves, once filled with model ships, were stripped clean. The expensive sound system, gone too. I went into the bedroom. The sliding wardrobe stood open. His side, where his suits, shirts, and sweaters had been, was completely empty. The shelves were bare except for a thin layer of dust. He'd taken everything. Even his slippers. But that wasn't all. I turned to my vanity. The jewelry box where I kept my mother's earrings, my grandmother's ring, and the chain my father had given me for my 18th birthday, was open. Empty. He'd taken them all. He'd taken my memories. I ran to the study. The small but valuable painting by a local artist that I'd inherited from my grandfather, gone. All the property and car documents from the desk drawer, gone too. Bryce followed me silently from room to room, jotting notes in his pad. He planned this, he said calmly. This wasn't impulsive. He systematically took everything he considered valuable. I stood in the middle of the ransacked apartment, my home that suddenly felt like a stranger's, and realized the truth. It wasn't just about getting rid of me. He wanted to destroy me. Erase me. Leave me with nothing. The accounts, I whispered. We had a joint bank account. All our savings were there. And the money from selling my mother's apartment. Bryce immediately pulled out his phone. Which bank? Do you have access to the online app? I don't. My phone's still in the car. No problem. We'll call the hotline. You'll need to answer a security question. He dialed the number and put it on speaker. After a few minutes, a female operator answered. Bryce introduced himself and explained the situation. The woman asked me to confirm my identity with my passport details and the security code. My mother's maiden name, I said. Yes, Tisa, I see your account. How can I help you? The polite voice responded. Could you please tell me the current balance? I asked, my voice barely recognizable. There was a pause. I could hear her typing. One moment, joint account under the names Tisa Willig and Dan Willig. Current balance is $0.07. I couldn't speak. The air left my lungs. Miss, Bryce cut in, could you check the last transactions? Was there a large withdrawal? Yes, of course. This morning at 9:03 a.m., there was a full withdrawal of all funds from the account at our Main Street branch. The amount was $325,000. The transaction was made by Dan Willig under a power of attorney. $325,000. Everything I had. Everything that was left of my mother. He hadn't just left me to die, he'd taken every last cent and only then driven me to the cemetery. He had planned it all. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just slowly looked around my looted apartment. Right there, on that wall, used to hang our wedding photo in its heavy frame. He'd taken that too, as if he wanted to erase not just our future, but our past. The cold anger that had been growing in me since yesterday turned into molten steel. It filled every cell of my body, burning away fear and pain. What was left was a ringing, furious emptiness, and a single thought, find him. Power of attorney, Bryce muttered, putting down the phone. Did you ever sign one? I nodded as the memory surfaced. Yes. 2 years ago. He said it was for some business paperwork, so I wouldn't have to deal with bureaucracy. I signed without reading. I trusted him. That's what he used, the lawyer said flatly. Legally, he had the right to withdraw the funds. Challenging it will be difficult. But taking property and abandoning you in a life-threatening situation, that's a different matter. But I didn't care about legal details. I didn't care how hard it would be. I only cared about one thing. Dan. We returned to Austin's house. He was waiting in the hall, and one look at my face told him everything. I walked silently into the living room and sat down in the same armchair as the night before. But this time, I didn't wrap myself in a blanket. I sat straight, hands resting on my knees. Bryce gave his report clearly and methodically, the empty account, the missing belongings, the stolen jewelry. Austin listened. His face, so compassionate and gentle yesterday, turned to stone. When Bryce finished, he sat quietly for a few seconds, staring into the fire. "All right," he said finally, his voice like ice. "So he's decided to play big." He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Paul. I need you to find someone." "Dan Willig." "Yes, Tesa's husband. I want to know where he is right now and what he's doing." "I'll wait." He hung up and looked at me. "My people will find him. It's only a matter of time. A few hours at most." Those hours were the longest of my life. They offered me lunch, but I couldn't eat a thing. I paced the massive living room from wall to wall like a caged animal. My pulse throbbed in my head, echoing one number over and over, $325,000. It wasn't just money. It was the last tangible piece of my mother's love, her care, her legacy, her final goodbye. He had stolen all of it. For a moment, I thought about calling Hannah. I wanted to tell her everything. She had to know what kind of monster her brother-in-law really was. She would support me, help me. But then my mother's final line in the letter came back to me: "Trust no one, Tisa. Especially not your sister." Why? Why had she written that? Maybe she just knew how impulsive Hannah could be, how easily she got emotional. Maybe she was afraid my sister might blurt something out. I pushed the thought aside. No. That couldn't be it. Hannah, my little sister, the one I used to babysit, the one I helped with homework. She'd never betray me. Mom had just been too cautious, too sick, too afraid. That had to be it. 3 hours passed. Dusk had already settled when the phone rang. Austin picked up. He listened silently, his face growing harder with every second. "Understood. Keep watching him. Don't lose sight," he said before hanging up. He turned to me. "We found him." "Where?" I asked, barely breathing. "At Le Grand." Le Grand, the most expensive, pretentious restaurant in the city. The kind of place where people celebrated major deals and anniversaries, where a single bottle of wine cost more than my monthly salary. Dan and I had been there once for our wedding anniversary, and he'd complained for months afterward about how much it had cost. "He's not alone," Austin added. "And he's not hiding. He's celebrating." Celebrating. The word detonated in my mind. He had left me to die in the cold, robbed me of everything, and now he was sitting in the city's fanciest restaurant celebrating his freedom, his victory over me. "I'm going there," I said, standing up. It wasn't a request. It was a decision. "Tisa, wait," Austin tried to stop me. "Don't. It's dangerous. Let us handle this legally." "Bryce." "No," I cut him off. "The law can wait. First, I need to look him in the eyes. Right now. While he's drinking champagne with my money. He needs to see me. He needs to know his plan failed." Austin looked at me, then at Bryce, and sighed. He saw the fire in my eyes. There was no point arguing. "All right. But I'm coming with you. Bryce too. We'll stay close." The drive to the restaurant took 15 minutes, but it felt like forever. I watched the city lights blur past without seeing them. All I could picture was his face, smiling, smug, the face of a traitor. We parked a block away. "We'll wait here," Austin said. "If anything goes wrong, we'll come in within a minute." I stepped out of the car. The night air was cold, but I didn't feel it. Everything inside me was burning. I walked to the brightly lit entrance of Le Grand. The doorman in a livery opened the heavy oak door for me. Inside, the air buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses. Live music played softly. The smell of perfume and rich food filled the space. A hostess with a polished smile approached me. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation?" I didn't answer. I just looked past her, scanning the room, and then I saw him. He was sitting at the best table by the panoramic window, the city lights glowing behind him. He really was celebrating. There was a silver ice bucket on the table with a bottle of champagne sticking out. He was laughing, loud, relaxed, carefree. A laugh I hadn't heard from him in years. He looked happy. And he wasn't alone. Across from him sat a woman. I could only see her from behind, dark, glossy hair pulled into an elegant bun, a slender neck, a straight back framed by the open neckline of a cocktail dress. Her hand rested lightly on his, lying on the white tablecloth. A new wave of rage shot through me. So that's what this was. He hadn't just gotten rid of me, he'd already replaced me. So fast. So easily. While I was freezing to death in the cemetery, he was already finding comfort in someone else's arms. I walked forward, straight toward his table. I didn't care about the curious stares from other guests. I moved without taking my eyes off his laughing face. The music, the chatter, the clinking glasses, all blurred into a dull hum. I saw only him. I was just a few steps away when he finally looked up and saw me. His laughter died mid-breath. The smile froze, then slipped from his face. His eyes filled with fear, disbelief, shock. He stared at me as if he were seeing a ghost. "Tisa," he mouthed. The woman sitting across from him sensed the sudden tension. She looked at him in confusion, then slowly, with a touch of irritation, began to turn her head toward me, to see who had dared to interrupt their celebration. That slow turn seemed to last forever. Then I saw her profile, the straight nose, the slightly pouty lips, the tiny mole above the upper one. When her face came fully into view, our eyes met. It was Hannah. My sister. At that moment, my world shattered for the second time. The first was when Dan left me to die in the cemetery. The second, now, when I saw Hannah's face twisted with guilt and fear. She sat there in an elegant dress, hair perfectly styled, holding the hand of the man who had tried to kill me just yesterday, drinking champagne bought with my stolen money. And in her eyes, I saw no remorse. Only annoyance at being caught. The music seemed louder now. Every eye in the restaurant was on us. I stood there, speechless, staring at the two of them. They looked perfect together, polished, beautiful, and equally vile. Dan was the first to react. He jumped up, knocking over his chair with a loud crash. "Tisa? What are you doing here? How did you survive?" I finished for him. My voice rang out loud and clear through the silence. "You must be wondering that. Thought they'd find me frozen somewhere in a snowbank?" Hannah stood up too. She tried to plaster on a look of surprise, even joy. "Tisa, you're alive. We were so worried. We've been looking for you everywhere." The lie was so bold, so disgusting, it made me flinch. I turned my gaze on her. "Looking for me? Here? In the most expensive restaurant in the city? With my husband? Worried? Is that why you're drinking champagne?" Red patches bloomed on her cheeks. People at nearby tables stopped eating and openly listened. "Tisa, this isn't what you think," Dan hissed, reaching for my hand. I jerked it away as if he'd burned me. "Don't touch me," I shouted. "Don't you ever touch me again." My voice echoed through the hall. The manager hurried toward us. "Excuse me, is everything all right? Maybe step outside to talk?" "No, we'll talk right here," I said, adrenaline making me fearless. "Let everyone hear. Let everyone know that this man, my husband, took me to the cemetery yesterday, on my late mother's birthday, and left me there to die in the cold. No money, no phone. And today he emptied our joint account, every cent, and came here to celebrate. And this, I pointed straight at Hannah, who shrank under my glare, is my sister. The one who apparently helped him plan my murder. The restaurant fell silent. Someone gasped. The manager froze mid-step, unsure what to do. Dan's face turned crimson with rage and humiliation. "You're insane," he growled. "You're making all this up. She's hysterical, it's grief after her mother's death." "Oh, really?" I sneered. "Hysterical? What about the money, Dan? The $325,000 you stole, was that part of my hysteria too?" He went pale at the exact number. Hannah grabbed her purse. "I'm leaving," she stammered, pushing past waiters as she ran for the door. Dan looked after her, then back at me, at the dozens of disgusted faces watching. He realized he'd lost. He threw some bills on the table, grabbed his coat, and stormed out, muttering curses under his breath. I stood alone in the middle of the room. They were gone, humiliated, exposed, defeated. I'd won. But there was no joy. Only scorched earth inside me. I turned slowly and walked out. No one stopped me. I passed the doorman, stepped into the freezing night, and took a deep breath. Austin and Bryce were waiting by the car. They had seen Dan and Hannah run out. Austin came up silently and draped his coat over my shoulders. I buried my face against his chest and, only then, allowed myself to tremble. We drove back to his house. I said nothing the whole way, trying to process what I had seen. Hannah. That, I hadn't been prepared for. It was too much, even for the twisted reality my life had become. Late that night, I was sitting in the living room, warming my hands around a cup of hot tea, when my phone rang, the new one Austin had given me. The screen showed Dan's number. I wanted to ignore it, but Austin, sitting across from me, shook his head. "Answer it. Put it on speaker." I pressed the button. "Tisa." His voice came through, but it wasn't the confident tone from the restaurant. It was frantic, panicked, angry. "What have you done? You ruined everything." "Ruined?" My own voice sounded cold, unfamiliar. "Did I leave you to die in the cold? Did I steal all our money?" "You don't understand," he shouted. "That money was my only chance. I needed that inheritance. I needed those funds." "What inheritance, Dan? What are you talking about?" "My mother didn't leave any inheritance. Just the money from selling her apartment, and you stole it." He burst into hysterical laughter. "No inheritance? Don't play dumb. Your mother was rich, Tisa. Everyone in town knew it. She had foreign accounts, properties, millions. I needed that money. I owed serious people a lot, and they gave me until the end of the week. If I didn't pay, they'd kill me. I thought the inheritance would cover it all. I thought I could get rid of you, take the money, and fix everything." I listened to his insane rambling, completely lost. A millionaire? My mother, a modest accountant who'd lived her whole life in a 2-bedroom apartment? Foreign bank accounts? You've lost your mind, Dan. My mother was never rich. Who fed you that nonsense? Don't play dumb, he screeched. You knew. You both knew. Then I heard a second voice through the phone, a sharp, cutting female voice. Hannah's. She must have grabbed the phone from him. Tisa? You hear me? Stop pretending to be some kind of saint, she hissed. Yes, I helped him. And you know what? I don't regret it. You were always Mom's favorite. Everything good went to you, her love, her attention, everything. I was always second best. So yeah, I was happy to help him get you out of the way. It was time I got what I deserve. What you deserve, Hannah? I asked, feeling the blood drain from my veins. Money that doesn't even exist? Dan's an idiot for believing those stories about millions, she said mockingly. But even what did exist, those $325,000, that's still something. Better than nothing. And now it's ours. But who? I demanded. Who told him about these imaginary millions? Where did that story even come from? And then Hannah, in her anger, slipped up. Why don't you ask your precious Aunt Lisa? She's the one who filled his head with it. She brought him fake bank statements, told him everything in detail. She was his proof. His only source. Aunt Lisa. Mom's older sister. We'd barely spoken for years. She'd always been bitter, jealous. After Mom's death, she called me once to give a cold, formal condolence, and that was it. And now I realized she had been the source of this insane lie. But why? Hannah must have realized she'd said too much, because there was some shuffling on the line, and then Dan's voice came back. Don't listen to her. It doesn't matter. Just give the money back, Tisa. Please. They're going to kill me. I hung up. Silence filled the room. I looked at Austin. His eyes were dark with resolve. The picture was finally coming together. This wasn't just a scheme between my husband and my sister. It was something bigger, uglier, and at the center of it was my aunt. I'd always known she disliked our family. Mom was the younger sister, the lucky one, at least in Lisa's eyes. She'd married for love, had 2 daughters. Lisa had stayed alone all her life, living in her tiny inherited apartment, working in some dusty archive. She always smelled faintly of mothballs and old resentment. But envy was one thing. Creating a lie that nearly got me killed, that was something else entirely. I need to talk to her, Austin said, standing up. His voice was calm, but I saw the muscle in his jaw tighten. No, I said, rising too. We need to talk to her. You and me. I want to look her in the eyes. I want to hear it from her. He nodded. Tomorrow morning. That night, I couldn't sleep again. My mind wouldn't stop spinning, not just about Dan and Hannah's betrayal, but about Lisa. Why? What did she gain from this? Just bitterness? Spite? Did she really want to destroy my life just because she thought mine was better than hers? It felt too small, too meaningless a reason for something so monstrous. In the morning, we drove to her place. She lived in a shabby part of town, in one of those old 3-story buildings. We climbed a grimy staircase to the 2nd floor. The hallway smelled exactly like her apartment always had: cat urine, sour cabbage, and hopelessness. Austin rang the bell. No answer for a while. Then came the shuffling of slippers, the rattle of a chain, and finally the door opened a crack. One eye peeked through. When she saw me, her face hardened immediately. Tisa? What do you want? She tried to shut the door, but Austin pressed his hand gently but firmly against it. Lisa, he said in a calm, commanding tone that made her flinch. I think it's in your best interest to let us in and answer a few questions. Otherwise, the next conversation will happen with the police present. That worked. She sighed, unhooked the chain, and reluctantly let us in. Inside was exactly how I remembered, a narrow hallway crowded with old furniture, a worn carpet, faded floral wallpaper, stale air heavy with dust. We walked into the living room. She didn't offer us to sit. She just stood there with her arms crossed, glaring at me. Well, she snapped. Why did you do it? I asked straight out. Why did you lie to Dan about the inheritance? Something flickered across her face of fear, but she quickly masked it with righteous anger. I don't know what you're talking about. What nonsense is this? Enough, Lisa, Austin said firmly. We have a recording of your conversation with Dan. And his statement. We know it came from you. The question isn't if you did it. It's why. She realized denial was useless. Her posture deflated, and she sank down onto the old, sagging couch. I wanted to test him, she muttered, staring at the floor. Test him? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Yes, to test him, she suddenly snapped, her voice shrill, hysterical. Your mother was too trusting, always believing everyone. I could see what your Dan was, a gold digger, after your money. I wanted to prove it to her. To you. I wanted you to see what he really was. So you made up a story about millions? I said, feeling anger boil inside me. Yes. I thought he'd take the bait, start demanding things, and then you'd finally see. I thought you'd leave him. I wanted to save you, she screamed. It was a test of loyalty, of character. And he failed it. A test? I took a step toward her. You call that a test? He nearly killed me because of your test. He left me to freeze to death in a cemetery. He stole everything I had. Do you even understand what you've done? I didn't think it would go that far, she whispered, and in her eyes I saw real, animal terror. I just wanted to expose him. I didn't know he was in debt. He told me later that they were threatening him. And right at that moment, when she said those words, someone started pounding on the door. Not knocking, but pounding. Heavy, brutal blows that made the walls shake. Lisa, open up, a rough male voice bellowed from the other side. It's them, she whispered, her eyes wild. The people Dan owes money to. They came yesterday too. The banging grew louder. It sounded like the door would come off its hinges any second. Open the door, old lady. We know you're in there. Where's your son-in-law, the thief? Austin stepped between me and the door. Tisa, get back, he said quietly, his voice steady. But it was too late. There was a crack, the lock gave way, and the door burst open. Two men stormed in. Huge, shaved heads, leather jackets, straight out of a bad gangster movie. One of them, with a broken nose, scanned the room, his gaze landing on Lisa, then on me and Austin. Well, he drawled with a smirk. Looks like we've got company. Lisa, where's our debtor? Where's Dan? I don't know. He's not here, she squealed. The second man, even bigger, stepped forward. Not good, Lisa. We heard you were close with him. Heard you told him about some money. About his wife's inheritance. So where's the wife? Where's the rich heiress? Both of them turned to me. Their eyes were empty, cold, predatory. The way wolves look at prey. There she is, said the one with the broken nose, jabbing a thick finger toward me. I've seen her photo. The wife. Tisa Willig. The heiress. I froze. The same cold I'd felt at the cemetery crept back, only this time it came from the inside. Turns out there's no inheritance after all, he went on, stepping closer. Austin moved in front of me. What do you want? He asked, his voice calm and sharp as ice. The thug grinned, sizing him up. And who the hell are you supposed to be? Her lawyer? Listen, counselor, your Dan owes us a lot of money. He was supposed to pay it back using his wife's inheritance. But there's no inheritance, and Dan's gone. The debt, though, didn't disappear. He sidestepped Austin and stopped right in front of me, his face so close I could smell the sweat and cheap tobacco. So listen up, sweetheart. Since your hubby's not around, you'll be the one paying. You're responsible for him now. We'll find you wherever you go, got it? I stared straight into his empty, arrogant eyes and felt nothing. No fear, no panic. Just cold, razor-sharp rage. After everything I'd been through in the last 2 days, these two thugs were just another obstacle. Something to be dealt with. I don't owe you anything, I said clearly, meeting his gaze. You can take your questions to my husband. My ex-husband. He blinked, taken aback. He'd expected tears, begging, panic, not defiance. He snorted and opened his mouth to throw another insult, but Austin stepped forward again, blocking his path. Austin was half a head shorter, but the quiet power in his stance, the steady, unflinching look in his eyes, made even that brute hesitate. Listen carefully, Austin said softly, his voice slicing through the stale air like a blade. You're going to turn around, walk out that door, and forget this address, and her name. Dan Willig's debts are his alone. Try to shift them onto her, and you'll regret it. Am I clear? The man with the broken nose looked at his partner. Neither of them had expected this kind of pushback, especially not from a gray-haired man in a cashmere coat. They were used to frightened businessmen, not someone who looked like he'd seen real danger. "Who the hell are you, old man, to tell us what to do?" the second one growled, trying to sound tough again. Austin didn't answer. He just looked the first one dead in the eyes. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then something changed in the thug's expression, a flicker of doubt, maybe fear. Whatever he saw in Austin's eyes, it scared him more than any threat could. "Let's go, Cole," he muttered to his partner, backing toward the door. "We'll deal with this later." They left, slamming the broken door behind them. Silence settled over the room. Aunt Lisa, who had cowered in the corner the whole time, slid down the wall to the floor, trembling like a leaf. A low, pitiful whimper escaped her. I looked at Austin. He was perfectly calm. "We need to leave," he said. We stepped over my stunned aunt and walked out. I knew I would never come back to that apartment again. In the car, I stayed silent. The events of the morning replayed in my head. Things had just escalated. This was no longer just betrayal or theft. Now it was a fight for survival. Who were those men? I asked finally, as we neared Austin's house. "Small-time gangsters pretending to be mafia," he said, eyes on the road. "Their boss calls himself Mike. Used to be a racketeer, now runs some car shops and a market. Your husband probably borrowed a lot from him, with high interest. And most likely, he used your supposed inheritance as collateral. And what happens now? Now Mike will go after Dan. Hard. And when he finds him, Dan's going to wish he hadn't. Those men don't forgive being played." His tone was calm, not pitying, just factual. When we got back, Austin immediately made several phone calls. Short, clipped sentences, orders I didn't quite understand. But I could feel it, a wall of protection was quietly being built around me. Security at the gates doubled. New men appeared, serious, silent, dressed in dark suits, patrolling the grounds. I was safe. Still, I couldn't shake the thought that somewhere out there, those thugs were hunting for Dan. And, to my own surprise, the thought brought me a grim, vengeful satisfaction. "Serves you right, Dan. You made this mess. You believed the lie meant to destroy me, and now it'll destroy you instead. You wanted me dead, and now you're the one running from death." Poetic justice, in its rawest form. I was sure of one thing, the danger was his problem now, not mine. I spent the next day in a fog. Austin surrounded me with a kind of quiet care I wasn't used to. He didn't press me with questions, didn't try to comfort me with empty words. He was just there. We spent hours in silence, and for the first time in years, that silence didn't feel lonely. It felt safe. I had found a father. And that feeling, that deep, steady presence, was so powerful it almost numbed the pain of everyone else's betrayal. That evening, Austin got another call. He stepped into his study to take it, and when he returned half an hour later, his face was dark. "My people found out more," he said, sitting down across from me. "Dan really does owe Mike a large sum, around $700,000. He claimed it was for business investments, but he blew it all on reckless trading schemes. Lost everything. $700,000. The number made me dizzy. Now his panic finally made sense. Mike's furious, Austin continued. The story about the fake inheritance has spread through the city's underworld. Everyone's laughing at him. For people like him, being made a fool is worse than losing money. It's about reputation. He'll find Dan, it's only a matter of time. And when he does, that conversation will be very short." I nodded. I could picture it. And honestly, I didn't care. Dan was dead to me, he died out there, in the snow. Whatever happened to his body now didn't matter. "So, that's it?" I asked. "They'll leave me alone now that they know I've got nothing to give?" Austin shook his head slowly. "Not exactly. Mike's practical. He knows he'll probably never see that money again. Killing Dan would just cost him more. So he's looking for other ways to make up for his loss. Other ways? I frowned. He's been digging through every record connected to your family, your assets, property, everything. And he found something. Austin paused. There was a look in his eyes, sympathy mixed with something heavier. I knew what that meant. Whatever he was about to say, I wouldn't like it. He discovered that the apartment you and Dan lived in is under Dan's mother's name. The car too. You don't own anything, except one thing. What thing? I whispered, feeling that familiar chill tighten around my chest. Your mother's country house, he said softly. Outside the city. Nice land, solid house. It's registered in your name. It's the only real asset that legally belongs to you. The country house. At those words, a wave of memories washed over me, warm, golden, untouchable. Summer days. The smell of apple blossoms. Grandma's pies cooling on the windowsill. Mom, young and laughing, watering flowers in the garden. Dad, the man I once thought was my father, teaching me how to ride a bike. That place wasn't just a property. It was my childhood. The one pure, unbroken piece of my life. He can't, I whispered. He has no right. He thinks he does, Austin said firmly. Legally, he can't take it. But he can make you give it up. He's decided that if he can't have the money, he'll take the house as payment for your husband's debt. The threat isn't against you anymore, Tisa. It's against the last thing that connects you to your past, to your mother. No. Not the house. Anything but that. Dan could have the money, the things, even the past we shared. But the country house, that was sacred. Every currant bush was planted by my mother's hands. Every board on that porch had once echoed with our laughter. To let some thugs touch it, claim it, defile it, impossible. He's not getting it, I said, and there was steel in my voice. The anger I felt now was different from before. It wasn't about revenge, it was about protection. It was about defending what still mattered. I won't give him the house, I said again, meeting Austin's eyes. Never. A faint smile flickered across his face. I didn't doubt that for a second. And we won't let him. We'll fight. And we did. The next morning, Austin gathered a team of lawyers in his study, led by Bryce, whom I already knew. They spread maps, files, and papers across the massive oak table. That was the first time I understood what real power looked like. It wasn't thugs breaking down doors, it was calm, focused people in tailored suits who could destroy or save someone's life with a single signature. Here's the situation, Bryce began, turning to me. The threats from Mike are straight-up criminal extortion. We could go to the police, but that's a long and uncertain process. They'll deny everything. Our main goal now is to secure your legal position. The country house is registered in your name. You inherited it from your mother, correct? Yes, I said. She transferred it to me a few years ago. All the papers should be at home. Should be. Then I remembered the empty drawers in Dan's study. A cold wave ran through me. He had taken them, all the documents, the apartment, the car, and probably the house too. Bryce lifted a calming hand. That's fine. Duplicates of all property documents are stored in the city archive and the real estate registry. We'll request new copies right away. What matters is that you are the sole legal owner. Without your consent or signature, no one can do anything with that house, not sell it, not gift it, not mortgage it. It's your fortress. His words steadied me. Yes. I was the owner. I had the power now. And with Austin and his people behind me, I wasn't afraid. I was ready for war. The first step, Bryce went on, is to get an updated extract from the property registry. It's an official document confirming the current owner. Just a formality, but we need it before taking any legal action. My assistant can go, but it'll be faster if you go personally, since you're the owner. I'll go, I said immediately. I needed to act, to hold that piece of paper in my hands, proof that the house was mine. Proof that it was still safe. An hour later, I was at the municipal office. A large echoing hall, rows of windows, the hum of waiting people, the blinking screen of the ticket queue. Ordinary life, so distant and unreal after everything that had happened. I took a number, sat down on a hard chair, and waited. Around me, people dealt with their own problems, someone applying for benefits, someone renewing a passport. And I was there to protect the last untouched island of my past from men who wanted to take it away. Finally, my number flashed on the screen. I walked up to the window, where a tired-looking middle-aged woman sat behind the glass. "Good afternoon. I'd like to request a property record from the real estate registry," I said, handing her my passport. She took it, typed something on her keyboard. "Property address? Meadowbrook Village, Apple Lane, house number 7, I recited automatically. I'd known that address by heart since childhood. She kept typing, her face blank. Just another task in her long workday. Thousands of people like me passed by her window every week. Then she printed a receipt. "Pay this at the terminal and bring back the slip." I paid, returned, and handed her the receipt. "All right. It'll take about 15 minutes, she said. 15 minutes, and I'd have the paper that would prove I was right. I checked the time. Every second dragged like an hour. I imagined walking back into Austin's office, handing the document to Bryce, and hearing him say, "Perfect. Now we're fully protected." 15 minutes turned into 20. Then 25. The clerk had moved on to other clients. I began to feel uneasy. Maybe she'd forgotten me? I walked up to the window again, waiting until the next person left. "Excuse me, you haven't forgotten about my request, have you? I'm waiting for the extract." She lifted her tired eyes to me. "No, I remember. Willig, right? There's something odd with your record. The system flagged it. I've sent a manual request to the archive for verification. It'll take a little longer." "Something odd?" I felt a chill run through me. "What exactly?" "I can't tell you yet. Please wait." She turned back to her screen, conversation over. I sat down again, my heart thudding uneasily. What could possibly be odd? The address was right. My name too. Probably just a technical glitch. Almost an hour passed. I was on edge, my fingers twisting the ticket stub. People came and went, solving their own small problems, while I sat frozen, waiting. Finally, the woman looked up and waved me over. I hurried to the counter. Her expression was strange. Almost sympathetic. "Here," she said, handing me a printed sheet. "Your extract." My hands trembled slightly as I took it. I scanned the lines. Address correct. Plot number correct. Property size correct. Everything matched. And then I reached the most important part, registered owner. I expected to see my name. Tisa Willig. But it wasn't there. I blinked. Read again. And again. The letters stayed the same. Clear, official, black on white. Owner, Lucille Willig. My mother-in-law. I stared at the paper, and the ground seemed to drop out from under me. "This can't be right," I whispered, looking at the clerk. "There's a mistake. I'm the owner. I never sold that property." She sighed. "I don't know what to tell you. I can only show what's in the system. According to the records, a month ago a sale was registered. Seller, you. Buyer, Lucille Willig. The transaction was done by the book. See?" She turned the monitor toward me. "Here's the contract. With your signature." I stared at the screen. At the scanned document. And there it was, a flowing signature at the bottom. It looked so much like mine. But it wasn't. "The date," I muttered, squinting at the numbers. "October 28th. A month ago. My birthday." Dan had surprised me that day, told me he had a gift. Said he wanted to transfer a share of his company to me so I could be a businesswoman. He brought a stack of papers, told me they were just routine forms for tax and registry purposes. I'd been so touched by his gesture, so happy, that I'd signed them all without reading while he poured champagne. And in that stack was the sale agreement for my country house. He had sold it to his mother a month ago. He had been planning this carefully, methodically, for a long, long time. I stood there in the government office, holding that sheet of paper, that death sentence, while the world went on around me. People were chatting, filing papers, paying fees. And I was standing in the middle of total silence and cold. He hadn't just prepared for this. He'd built a web, and I, blind and trusting, had flown straight into it, fluttering like a fool. Businesswoman. What a joke. What humiliation. I don't remember walking outside. I don't remember getting into Austin's car, waiting in the parking lot. I just handed him the document in silence. He read it, his face calm, expression unchanged, except for that flicker of something dangerous in his eyes. He didn't say a word. Just started the engine and drove off. When I told him about my birthday, about the stack of papers, the gift, he gripped the steering wheel tighter. A classic setup, he said flatly. Fraud by abuse of trust. Hard to prove in court. The signature's yours, and you were in your right mind. They covered every angle. I repeated slowly. So it wasn't just Dan. It was her too, Lucille. The woman who smiled at me, called me daughter. She knew. She'd been part of it. She hadn't just bought the house, she'd helped her son steal it from me. I need to see her, I said. Tisa, that's pointless, Austin tried to reason. She won't tell you the truth. She'll stick to her story. We'll just waste time. I know, I said quietly. But I have to. I need to look her in the eyes, just like I looked at Dan and Hannah. I need to see it for myself. He understood. I needed this, to burn the last bridge, to purge the final traces of illusion about the people I had once called family. Lucille lived in a nice apartment downtown. We rang the buzzer. It took her a while to answer. Who is it? Came her sharp, scratchy voice through the speaker. It's Tisa, Lucille. I need to talk to you. There was a long pause, then the door clicked open. She was waiting for us in the doorway of her apartment. She wore an expensive silk robe, her hair perfectly styled. She looked as if she'd been expecting this visit and was more than ready for it. Her gaze slid over me, then stopped on Austin. For a split second, curiosity flashed in her eyes, followed by a touch of disdain. So this is your new protector, that look seemed to say. Come in, she said in a tone people use when inviting in unwanted guests. Her apartment was just as I remembered, pristine. Antique furniture, polished parquet floors, heavy velvet curtains. Everything screamed wealth and respectability. False respectability, I realized now. She didn't offer us seats. She stood in the middle of the living room, arms crossed, the same stance Lisa had taken. A mix of defense and attack. I'm listening, Tisa. What's so urgent? Without a word, I handed her the property record. She didn't even look at it. Oh, that, she said with a crooked smile. So you finally found out. I was wondering how long it would take. Her arrogance, her smugness, it stunned me. How could you? I managed to whisper. That was my mother's country house. You knew how much it meant to me. Meant, didn't mean, what's the difference? She shrugged. Business is business. Dan needed money to cover his expenses, serious ones. As his wife, it was your duty to help him. But you had nothing, dear. Except that house. So you helped. Everything's fair. Fair? My voice trembled with fury. Tricking me into signing papers without telling me what they were, you call that fair? No one tricked you, she snapped. Her eyes were cold, assessing. You signed them yourself, didn't you? With your own hand. You should have read what you were signing, my girl, instead of living in a dream world. Real life is harsh. Those who fall behind lose. The house is mine now, and I'll do whatever I please with it. I'll probably sell it. The land's valuable. She said it slowly, savoring every word, every breath of my helpless anger. She'd won. She had taken the last piece of my life and stood there, calm and righteous, shielded by the law and my own stupidity. She had won the war. I understood now that Austin had been right. Coming here was pointless. I'd only given her the satisfaction of humiliating me again, of basking in her victory. We're leaving, I said, turning toward the door. Yes, go, she called after us. And tell my useless son not to call me again. I've done my part for him. He's on his own now. We stepped outside. The cold air hit my face and brought me back to myself. It was a complete defeat. Bryce had been right, proving fraud would be almost impossible. And Lucille was right, too, legally, the house was hers now. I had lost. That evening, I stayed in my room at Austin's house. I refused dinner. I just sat in an armchair, staring at the dark window. Helplessness. That's what it was, vile, sticky, all-consuming helplessness. They'd all played me. My husband, my sister, my aunt, my mother-in-law. A whole team against me, alone. But I couldn't give up. I couldn't let her sell my mother's house, the house of my childhood, to some stranger. There had to be a way. Everyone has a weak spot, and then I remembered. There was one hiding place in my ransacked apartment, one Dan didn't know about. In the storage above the hallway closet, behind old suitcases, was a big box. I'd kept all our family things there, old photos, letters, postcards, Mom's journals. Things Dan never cared about. I need to go back, I told Austin when he came to check on me. To my apartment. There are old family archives there. Maybe I'll find something, some clue. Anything. He looked doubtful, but didn't argue. We'll go. The apartment greeted me with its hollow emptiness. I brought a small ladder from the kitchen, climbed up, and pulled out the dusty box. I dumped its contents onto the living room floor, a mountain of faded photographs, yellowed letters, worn-out postcards. I sat there, sifting through the fragments of a lost life. Me as a child, with ribbons in my hair. Mom and Dad at the beach. Hannah on her first day of school. Every image hurt like a fresh wound. An hour passed. Then another. Nothing. Just echoes of happiness that no longer existed. I was about to give up when I noticed a small stack of postcards, birthday and Christmas cards from relatives, mostly from Dan's side of the family. I flipped through them mechanically. Same empty wishes, health, happiness, success. And then one card caught my eye. It was different. Old, with a dull cityscape on the front. It was from Dan's cousin in Riverside. I'd only met her a couple of times, at the wedding. The card had been addressed to Lucille, but somehow ended up in our box. Probably Lucille had passed it to us to show off. I turned it over. The handwriting was messy, uneven. Dear Aunt Lucille, happy birthday. I hope everything is getting better after that awful business in Riverside. Say hi to Dan. Love, your niece, Kate. That awful business in Riverside. What was that? I'd never heard of Lucille living in Riverside or having any business there. She'd always bragged about being a lifelong resident of our city. The phrase stuck with me. Odd, out of place for a birthday card. A hint of something dark. I took a photo of the card with my phone. There was nothing concrete in it, just the name of the city, just a shadow of a secret. But it was something. The first crack in Lucille's perfect armor. I went back to Austin and showed him the photo. Riverside, he said thoughtfully. Lucille Willig. Interesting. He picked up his phone and dialed. Paul, he said. I've got a new lead for you. Lucille Willig. Check every database connected to the city of Riverside, civil, criminal, administrative, financial, court filings, debts, bankruptcies, anything. I need every trace of that awful business she was involved in. Immediately. He hung up and looked at me. Now we wait. We didn't have to wait long. An hour later, Austin's phone rang. He listened in silence, and I watched his face slowly change, first surprise, then a sharp, predatory smile spreading across it. When he hung up, he looked straight at me. "Well, Tisa, looks like your instincts didn't fail you. You found her weak spot. Our untouchable Lucille has a rather interesting skeleton in her closet. 5 years ago, in Riverside, she was charged with large-scale fraud. A real estate scam. The case never went to court. She managed to bury it with a lot of money. But it wasn't closed. It's still there. Sleeping in the archives. And we're about to wake it up. We're about to wake it up." The words hit like a gunshot at the start of a race. The helplessness that had crushed me all evening evaporated. In its place came a sharp, thrilling sense of power. She thought she'd cornered me. Thought she'd won. But now I had a lever, small, rusty maybe, but strong enough to turn her whole world upside down. Austin and his team moved with lightning speed. The next morning, Bryce and 2 assistants flew out to Riverside. Their goal wasn't just to find the case file. They were going to dig it up, track down the original investigator, locate the victims, breathe life back into it. I waited. But this time, waiting didn't feel like anxiety, it was anticipation. For the first time, I wasn't the prey. I was the hunter. I knew Lucille suspected nothing. She was sitting in her spotless apartment, sipping her morning coffee, probably already talking to realtors about selling my house. She was certain she'd gotten away with everything. And that made the coming fall even sweeter. On the 3rd day, Bryce returned. He stepped into Austin's office, where we were waiting, and dropped a thick folder onto the table. "It's even better than we hoped," he said with a satisfied smile. "The file wasn't just collecting dust, the investigator who handled it is still around. An honest, stubborn man who was furious when the case got buried. He was more than happy to see us. The victims, an elderly couple who lost everything, were also found. They're ready to testify again. We've got enough material here to reopen the case immediately. And this time, with our support, no one will be able to bury it. For Lucille, that means guaranteed prison time, 5 to 10 years, plus confiscation." I could hardly breathe. Prison. For her. For this polished, arrogant woman who prized her reputation more than anything, this was worse than any financial ruin. "What do we do next?" I asked. "Now, Tisa," said Austin, "it's your turn. You'll call her and ask for a meeting. Here, on our turf. No names, no details over the phone. Just tell her you have an offer she won't be able to refuse, something about the house." My hands trembled as I dialed her number, but my voice was steady. "Lucille, hello. It's Tisa." A pause. Then her scratchy voice came through. "What do you want now?" I thought we were done. "I want to make you an offer," I said calmly. "It's about the country house. Let's meet and talk. Today. 5 o'clock. She was silent for a moment, probably weighing her options. Greed must have won. She likely thought I wanted to buy the house back. "Fine," she said finally. "But not in some cafe. Come to my place." "No," I cut her off. "Not at your place. And I won't be alone. My representative will be with me. We'll meet at the Tower Business Center, conference room, 10th floor, at 5. If you don't come, this offer will never be repeated. And believe me, you'll regret it." I hung up before she could respond. Even I was surprised by my own boldness. But I'd earned the right to it. At exactly 5 o'clock, Austin, Bryce, and I were sitting in the rented conference room overlooking the city. Lucille arrived 10 minutes late, probably to make a point. She walked in, proud and composed, and when she saw Austin and the lawyer, her lips twisted in disdain. "What is this circus?" I thought this was between you and me. Oh, it is, Austin said evenly, gesturing toward the chair across from us. Sit down, Lucille. She sat, placing her expensive leather purse on the table. Well? I'm listening. What's your offer, Tisa? Want money? Don't hold your breath. Without a word, I slid the thick folder across the table toward her. Open it. Read. She frowned, glanced from me to the folder, then reluctantly opened it. On top was a copy of an old court order, the very same fraud case from 5 years ago, with her name printed clearly across it. I watched her face shift, confusion, recognition, then fear. Real fear. The kind that shows in your eyes before you can hide it. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the pages, witness statements, expert reports, and her mask began to crack. Where did you get this? She whispered, looking up at us. The arrogance was gone. That doesn't matter, Bryce said coolly. What matters is what happens next. We're planning to reopen this case. And this time, I assure you, it will go to court and end with a conviction. She looked from him to me, and I saw the moment she understood. This wasn't a bluff. Her perfect little world was about to collapse. What do you want? She breathed. It's simple, I said, letting every word sink in. Tomorrow morning, we meet at the notary's office. You sign a deed of gift, transferring the country house back to me. No payment. No tricks. You give it back, freely. She sat there, staring down at the table. I could almost see the battle going on inside her. On one side, the house, the money. On the other, her freedom. Finally, in a low voice, she said, All right. I agree. I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. Victory. Pure and absolute victory. But, she said, lifting her head, and that sharp, spiteful gleam returned to her eyes, I have one condition. You're in no position to make conditions, Austin said coldly. Oh, I think I am, she smirked. You wouldn't want me to drive straight to the police from here and file a report for blackmail and extortion, would you? You'd have a hard time proving otherwise. It would be messy, exhausting. So let's negotiate. Bryce's jaw tightened. We're listening. You, Tisa, she began, have already destroyed my family's reputation with your public outburst at that restaurant. The rumors spreading around town are disgusting. Dan can't get a decent job now, his career is ruined. You're going to fix that. And how exactly do you expect me to do that? I asked. In 2 weeks, the city is hosting the annual charity gala organized by your late mother's foundation. You'll be there, as her daughter. You'll give a speech. She reached into her bag, pulled out a folded sheet of paper, and slid it across the table to me. Here, she said. It's all written out. You'll go on stage and read this. Word for word. I unfolded the page, and as I began to read, my stomach turned. It wasn't just a speech. It was a public self-destruction. According to this script, I was supposed to tell everyone that everything that had happened, all of it, was the result of a nervous breakdown after my mother's death. That, in a state of emotional instability, I'd misunderstood my husband's actions. I was to apologize to Dan and his family for my baseless accusations. And at the end, I had to thank my patient, loving, heroic husband for enduring my behavior and staying by my side during such a difficult time. She wanted me to stand on that stage, in front of the entire city, my mother's friends, her colleagues, the press, and humiliate myself. To declare that I was unstable, hysterical. To absolve them all, Dan, Lucille, and even Hannah. To bury my own dignity in exchange for what was already rightfully mine. My mother's house. It was a devil's bargain, cruel, calculated, and meant to destroy me. I read the last line and slowly raised my eyes to hers. Lucille was smiling, triumphant. She thought she'd won again. That she'd found the perfect revenge, forcing me to denounce the truth with my own lips. I didn't speak. Neither did Austin or Bryce. They were watching me, waiting. The decision was mine. I took the sheet in both hands. Then, slowly and deliberately, I tore it in half. Then again. And again. Until nothing remained but small, pathetic scraps of paper. I gathered them and tossed them onto the table in front of her stunned face. "No," I said. My voice was quiet, but in the heavy silence of the conference room, it sounded like a gunshot. "What do you mean, no?" she hissed. "You don't have a choice." "There's always a choice," I said, standing up. "And I've made mine. Keep the house. Sell it. Choke on it. But I will never, ever speak a single word of that filth you wrote. My name and my mother's truth are worth more than any piece of land." I looked at Austin. His eyes were filled with pride. Tears burned in mine. He stood up silently, and Bryce followed. "You're making a huge mistake," Lucille shouted after us. "I'll destroy you." We walked out, leaving her alone with her rage and those shredded pieces of her failed revenge. In the car, I cried. But this time, they weren't tears of weakness. They were tears of fury and freedom. I had just let go of the last thing that tied me to my past. I'd lost the battle for the house. But I'd won something far greater. I'd saved myself. "I'm proud of you, Tisa," Austin said quietly as we pulled up to his house. "Your mother would be proud of you too." Those words were worth more to me than any home. The next 2 weeks passed in an uneasy calm. Lucille didn't call. Dan and Hannah had vanished. The gangsters were nowhere to be seen. Everything seemed to have paused, waiting. Waiting for the gala. I knew I had to be there. It was my mother's foundation. She'd poured her heart into it during her final years. I couldn't let her name or her work be tainted by their lies. That's when a new plan began to form, bold, risky, but the only right one. Lucille had handed me the perfect weapon, the stage. The microphone. And the biggest audience in the city, all the elite, all the officials, all the journalists. "I'm going to speak at the gala," I told Austin a few days before the event. He looked at me anxiously. "Tisa, are you sure?" "After everything." "I've never been more sure," I interrupted. "But I'm not reading her speech. I'll give my own. I'll tell the truth, all of it. About Dan, about Hannah, about Lisa and her little test, about Lucille and her fraud. I'll expose them for who they really are. It won't be a speech. It'll be a public execution." Austin was silent for a long time, weighing my words. I could see the conflict on his face of fear for me, but also admiration. "It's dangerous, Tisa," he said finally. "They might try to stop you. Once they realize you're not playing by their rules." "I'm not," I said firmly. "Because the rules are over. Now, it's my game." The night of the gala, I was a mess of nerves. I chose a simple, elegant black dress. No jewelry. I didn't want to look like a victim. I wanted to look like a judge. Austin insisted I take his car, with a driver and 2 bodyguards. We left early. The city glowed with evening lights, soft snowflakes drifting through the air. Everything looked so peaceful, so ordinary. But I knew I was on my way to the biggest confrontation of my life. We were driving down Central Avenue, just 2 blocks from the Philharmonic Hall where the event was being held. The street was nearly empty. Then, in the rearview mirror, I saw headlights. A car speeding toward us, too fast. "What's that?" I asked the driver. "No idea." "Probably some reckless idiot," he said, glancing tensely into the mirror. But it wasn't some idiot. The car pulled up beside us, a battered dark red Honda. It kept pace with us perfectly, like it was glued to our side. I turned my head, trying to see who was inside, but the windows were tinted. "Lose it," the guard in the passenger seat ordered. The driver pressed the accelerator. The Honda did the same. Then, in an instant, it swerved hard toward us. A deafening screech of metal tore through the night. Our heavy car jolted violently. I hit my head against the window. The driver fought for control, but the Honda rammed us again, this time from behind. The world spun, city lights blurring into streaks of color, then the sound of tires screaming against asphalt. Everything happened in seconds. Our car spun sideways, smashed through a guardrail, and slid down into a snow-filled ditch. The impact wasn't massive, but sharp enough to knock the air out of me. Airbags exploded. Then, blackness. When I came to, the cabin smelled like smoke and burned plastic. The guards were already climbing out, shouting into their radios. "Tisa, are you okay?" one of them asked, pulling open my door. I stumbled out, trembling from head to toe. My head was ringing, my forehead stung, blood. But I was alive. I looked toward the road. The Honda had stopped about 20 meters away, turned sideways across the lane. Its front end was crushed, smoke billowing from under the hood. Then the driver's door opened slowly. A figure stepped out, staggering. In the streetlight glow, I recognized the coat immediately. The figure took a few steps forward, then turned toward me. For a brief second, passing headlights lit up her face, twisted with rage, fear, and desperation. It was Hannah. My sister. She tried to kill me. Again. This time for real, to make sure I never reached that stage, never spoke a word. I stood on the roadside, the snow crunching beneath my shoes, staring at her. The wind whipped her hair around her face, smoke curling around her like a dark halo. She looked at me with nothing but raw, animal hatred. She didn't just want me silenced. She wanted me erased. Austin's guards were already running toward her. Hannah froze for a moment, then bolted, stumbling in her heels, slipping on the icy pavement. She disappeared into the shadows of a nearby alley. One guard chased her. The other stayed by the wreck, calling the police and an ambulance. "You need to go to the hospital," he said. "You've got a head injury." "No," I said, touching the blood on my forehead. "I need to go to the gala. Now." The shock was gone. What replaced it was cold, razor-sharp determination. Hannah's desperate attack only confirmed everything. They were terrified. Desperate. Willing to kill me to keep me quiet. That meant I was right. That meant I had to finish this, tonight. "The car's totaled, Tisa," the guard protested. "We should wait. Get a taxi. Flag down a car. Anything. I need to be there in 10 minutes. He looked at me, saw the fire in my eyes, and didn't argue. A few minutes later, he flagged down a passing car, explained the situation, pressed a few large bills into the driver's hand. We climbed in. "To the Philharmonic," he said. "And step on it." It took 5 minutes. I stared out the window, at my reflection. My hair was a mess, my dress torn at the shoulder, blood smeared across my forehead. I looked terrible. I looked like a victim. And I decided not to fix it. Let them see. Let everyone see what they'd done to me. We pulled up to the main entrance. Photographers crowded the red carpet, luxury cars lining the curb. I stepped out of the taxi. The reaction was immediate with gasps, flashes, chaos. Cameras went off in a storm of light. "Tisa, what happened? Were you in an accident?" I said nothing. The guard pushed through the crowd, clearing a path for me. Inside the Philharmonic, the air buzzed with chatter and champagne laughter. Women in evening gowns, men in tuxedos. Everyone smiling until they saw me. Then the smiles faded. Conversations hushed. I felt hundreds of eyes on me, curious, shocked, pitying. Like I was some strange exhibit. I walked into the main hall. It was packed. On stage, the host, a local celebrity, was speaking into the microphone. I stopped near the entrance, in the shadows, scanning the crowd. I was looking for them. Dan. Lucille. But they weren't there. Then I heard what the host was saying, and froze. And of course, tonight we honor the memory of the founder of our foundation, the unforgettable Hedi Sisley, he announced in his smooth, booming voice. Her kindness and generosity will forever remain in our hearts. And this evening, we are especially mindful of the difficult times her family has recently endured." He paused dramatically. The audience murmured sympathetically. "We all know about the challenging situation her elder daughter, Tisa Willig, has found herself in," he continued. "And we all admire the courage and devotion of her husband, Dan Willig, who, despite everything, has stood by her side through this difficult period." I felt sick to my stomach. The whole thing was staged. They'd taken control. Right there, in front of the entire city, they were turning me into a lunatic. "Unfortunately, Tisa herself couldn't be with us tonight," the host continued, shaking his head with exaggerated sorrow. "Her condition doesn't allow her to attend. But her husband is here, a man with a capital M. Please welcome to the stage, Dan Willig." The hall erupted in applause. And then he appeared. My husband. He stepped out from behind the curtains in a perfectly tailored black suit. His face was pale, dark circles under his eyes, probably added by a skilled makeup artist. He looked exhausted, tormented, but noble. The perfect tragic hero. He walked up to the microphone. The applause faded. He gazed across the hall with that sorrowful look he had perfected. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice breaking just enough to sound human. "Thank you for your support. We need it now more than ever." He paused, letting the audience soak in the emotion. "You all know how much I loved and respected my mother-in-law, Hetty. Her passing was a terrible loss for all of us. But for my dear wife, for my Tisa, it was devastating." He said my Tisa with such fake tenderness that my jaw clenched. Her fragile mind couldn't bear the grief. What's happening to her now isn't her fault, it's an illness. A terrible illness that makes her say horrible things, do reckless things, accuse those closest to her of unimaginable sins. A sympathetic murmur spread through the audience. I saw women in diamonds dabbing their eyes with napkins. They believed him. Every word. "I did everything I could," he went on, his voice trembling. "I was patient. I forgave. I hoped that our love would help her heal. But the illness is stronger than I am. Stronger than both of us. Every day she gets worse. She's become dangerous, to herself and to others." He bowed his head, as if too heartbroken to go on. The host stepped closer, laid a hand on his shoulder. "Dan, we're all with you," the host said solemnly. Dan lifted his head. His eyes shone with tears, but his gaze was firm. The look of a man who'd made a hard but noble choice. "That's why," he said, voice ringing with conviction, "I had no choice but to take drastic action. For her sake. To save her. This morning, after consulting the city's best doctors, I filed an official request to the court for the compulsory psychiatric evaluation and treatment of my wife, Tisa Willig." A collective gasp swept through the room. But it wasn't shock. It was admiration. "I'm doing this because I love her," he cried. "I'm doing this to save her. So that one day, when she's well again, we can be together, happy, like we once were." He finished. The hall exploded with applause. People rose to their feet, clapping, cheering for this hero, this saint. And I stood there, in the shadows by the entrance, watching my world collapse. It hit me all at once, this wasn't just theater. It wasn't just a public performance. It was a trap. A legal one. If the court declared me mentally unstable, they could lock me away. I'd lose everything, my rights, my property, my freedom. He'd found a way to silence me forever. And do it in a way that made everyone see him as the savior. It was brilliant. Evil, but brilliant. I stood frozen, horrified, but grudgingly awed by his devilish cleverness. He wasn't defending himself anymore. He was attacking. He'd taken my truth, twisted it, and turned it into proof of my insanity. The applause thundered like hammers driving nails into my coffin. People looked at him with adoration. He was the victim. He was the saint. And I was the madwoman who needed to be locked away. I realized then that I'd lost. No matter what I said or did now, It would only prove his point. My disheveled hair, the blood on my forehead, perfect evidence of my breakdown. One scream, one word in protest, and I'd be dismissed as unwell. The trap had snapped shut. And then, just as the applause reached its peak, just as Dan basked in his triumph, bowing to his adoring crowd, the main doors of the hall burst open. Standing in the doorway was Austin Stoll. He wasn't alone. Bryce was beside him, along with two men in dark suits who looked every bit like bodyguards. Austin wasn't a public man. He rarely appeared at social events. But everyone in that room, from the mayor to the gossip columnists, knew exactly who he was. They knew about his empire, his influence, his reputation for being ruthless. His appearance here was like a tiger walking into a room full of rabbits. The applause died instantly. Conversations cut off midword. Hundreds of heads turned toward the doors. The air went still, heavy with tension. Everyone waited. Austin's footsteps echoed in the silence as he walked down the aisle, calm, steady, commanding. Dan froze on stage. The confident expression on his face twisted into confusion, then fear. He had no idea what was happening. Austin climbed the side stairs onto the stage. Dan instinctively backed away. Without a word, Austin reached out and took the microphone from his hands, like taking back something that had always been his. He turned to the audience. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," he said into the mic. His deep, steady voice filled every corner of the hall. "My name is Austin Stoll. I apologize for interrupting your evening. I'm here on behalf of Tisa Willig." A wave of whispers rippled through the crowd. Heads turned, eyes searching for me. "What you just heard from Mr. Willig, that touching story," Austin continued, his voice cutting clean and sharp through the air, "that story of love, pain, and sacrifice, unfortunately, it's just that, a story. A fabrication. A lie from start to finish. And now, I'd like to show you the facts." He turned and gave a nod to a man standing quietly near the side of the stage. The man slipped over to the tech console. A second later, the huge screens hanging on both sides of the stage, meant for videos about the foundation, flared to life. The first image appeared. A close-up of a bank statement. The joint Willig account. Two numbers circled in red. The first, the balance on the morning of the day I was left at the cemetery, $325,000. The second, the balance at the end of that same day, 7 cents. At the bottom, Dan's signature and the date of the transaction. The audience gasped. Loudly, chaotically. Dan went white as a sheet. This is fake," he shouted into the void, since he no longer had the microphone. "It's edited. She hacked my computer." But no one was listening to him. All eyes were on the screens. The image changed. Now, the screen showed the contract for the sale of the country house, with my forged signature. And the name of the new owner, Lucille Willig. The noise in the hall swelled. People began whispering, turning from the screen to Dan, whose face was frozen in panic. This is a family matter," he stammered. "We agreed on it. She wanted it herself." The image changed again. Now, on the screens was a scanned handwritten confession, Aunt Lisa's confession. Her signature, clear and undeniable. The words read, "I, Lisa Montgomery, freely confess that I deliberately misled my niece's husband, Dan Willig, by giving him false information about a multi-million-dollar inheritance." A bomb had gone off. The room erupted in shocked murmurs, like a hive struck with a stick. Lies about inheritance, empty accounts, the stolen house, it all clicked into one ugly, undeniable picture. The crowd now looked at Dan not with sympathy, but with disgust. His heroic mask was cracking. "It's all lies," he finally screamed, losing control. He lunged at Austin, trying to snatch the microphone from his hand. "She's insane. She made it all up. She's sick. She's punishing me for trying to help her." Austin shoved him aside easily with one hand. His calm was like ice. "So you're saying Tisa is mentally ill and fabricated all of this?" he asked into the microphone, his voice echoing through the hall. Yes. Yes, she's crazy. Dan yelled, wild-eyed. It's the ravings of a lunatic. All right, Austin said evenly. Then maybe you can explain this. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small digital recorder, and held it up to the mic. Then he pressed play. For a moment, the hall went utterly silent. Then came a faint sound, the soft breathing of someone asleep. And then voices. Muffled. Whispering. A man's and a woman's. Dan's voice, quiet, you'll wake her. A woman's voice, the doctor said after the shot, she'll sleep until morning. Like the dead. Dan's voice again, you sure your plan will work? What if she doesn't freeze? What if someone finds her? The woman, Hannah's voice, laughed softly. Who's gonna find her? The cemetery's empty. By morning, she'll just be an icicle. They'll call it a tragic accident. Grieving daughter goes to her mother's grave and freezes to death. Perfect. Then we split the inheritance and live happily ever after. A short, cruel laugh. Hannah again, inheritance. You actually believe that old witch Lisa and her millions? Dan's voice, what else could she do? She showed me the statements. Even if it's not millions, half of that's enough to pay off my debts and get us out of this town. The recording stopped. The hall was dead silent. Not a whisper. Not a breath. Every eye was locked on the stage, on the screen still showing Lisa's confession, on Austin holding the recorder, and on Dan. He stood there, white as a ghost, his mouth open, staring at the recorder as if it had just bitten him. He couldn't process it. It was his own voice, his greed, his cruelty, captured forever in the room where he thought no one could hear. It was my mother's ghost, returning from beyond to deliver justice. The silence lasted maybe 10 seconds. But to me, it felt like forever. Time itself had stopped. Then the quiet shattered, not with applause, but with a deep, rumbling sound. The low, furious murmur of hundreds of people who had just realized they'd witnessed a monstrous crime. People stood up. No one shouted. They just buzzed, an ugly, rising roar filled with disgust and outrage, so thick it felt like it might crush Dan where he stood. I stepped out of the shadows. I walked down the center aisle toward the stage. People parted to let me through. They looked at me, my torn dress, the blood on my forehead, and in their eyes there was no curiosity now, no pity. Only shame. Shame that they had believed him. That they had applauded him. I climbed onto the stage and stood beside Austin. Then I looked at Dan. He was frozen, staring at the crowd. He saw it, hundreds of faces that, just a minute ago, had worshipped him. Now they twisted in revulsion. He watched, helpless, as his world, his reputation, his entire life turned to ash, right before his eyes. At that moment, 2 police officers appeared near the side exits of the hall. They moved slowly but purposefully down the aisles, not toward the stage, but toward a woman in the third row who was trying to slip quietly toward the door. Lucille. They stopped her. One of the officers said something quietly, and she began waving her hands, protesting. But they each took her by the arm and led her out, calmly, without a scene. Austin, I realized, hadn't just invited them. He'd planned every detail so that her humiliation would be complete, but silent. All eyes in the room were now fixed on the new spectacle, the public arrest of a mother in front of the entire city. Her social death was immediate. Irreversible. And where was Hannah? I scanned the hall. She wasn't there. She must have realized, after the crash, that it was over, and fled. Just like a rat escaping a sinking ship, leaving Dan to face everything they'd built together. Dan saw his mother being let out. That snapped him out of his daze. He turned to me, and in his eyes I saw something I'd never seen before, not fear, not panic, not even the cold calculation I'd come to know so well. It was pure, distilled hatred. The kind that only appears when an animal is cornered. He suddenly stepped toward me. Austin and the guards, already on stage, moved instinctively to intercept him, but I stopped them with a gesture. I wanted to hear what he had to say. He came close, so close I could feel his breath. His face was twisted with rage. "You," he hissed, just loud enough for me to hear. "You think you've won? You think you've destroyed everything? You destroyed it yourself, Dan," I said quietly. "Me?" He let out a sharp, unhinged laugh. "I just wanted to live. To live well. But you were always in the way. Miserable, boring, perfect little you. You and your saint of a mother." He turned and looked at Austin, who stood nearby, fists clenched. Then back at me, and I saw it. That last flash of venom in his eyes. He knew exactly how to hurt me, how to deliver the one blow I might never recover from. He grabbed my wrist. His fingers dug into my skin like claws. He leaned in, his whisper hot and poisonous against my ear. "Don't you think it's a little too convenient?" he murmured. "Your real daddy suddenly shows up, rich, powerful, and just weeks later your mother dies. Perfect timing, huh?" I froze. I didn't understand what he was getting at. "Ask him," he continued, nodding toward Austin. "Ask him about that miracle medicine he sent for her from abroad. The one for the pain. The one that worked so well. So painlessly." A chill spread through my veins. "He didn't save her, Tisa," Dan breathed, his final drop of poison. "He killed her. Slowly, quietly, with her permission. Euthanasia, sweetheart. He just helped her go, to clear his path. To get you. All of you. Without the sick old woman weighing him down. So go on, celebrate your victory, standing on your mother's grave." He released my hand, shoved me back, and started laughing. Loud, manic laughter that echoed through the hall. The guards rushed him. They twisted his arms behind his back and dragged him off the stage. He didn't resist. He just kept laughing. He'd lost everything, but he knew he'd just planted a time bomb deep inside me. In my trust. In my faith in the only person who'd ever saved me. I stood alone on the stage. The noise of the crowd, the flashes, the voices, all faded into the distance. All I could hear was his whisper replaying in my head. He didn't save her. He killed her. I looked at Austin. He was watching me with concern and tenderness, but for the first time since I met him, I saw something else in his eyes. A shadow. A secret. And Dan's venomous words found their mark. The seed of doubt took root, and it grew fast. It spread through me like poison. I looked at Austin, this strong, steady man, my father, and for the first time, I saw not only safety in his face, but danger. Dan had lost everything, but with his final move, he might have won the most important battle of all, the one for my soul. He might have tainted the one pure thing left in my life. We drove home in silence. The roar of the crowd, the camera flashes, Dan's crazed laughter, they all stayed behind. The car was quiet, filled only with the sound of my thoughts and my fear. Fear that Dan's final lie might be the most terrible truth of all. When we walked into the house, I couldn't keep it in anymore. I stopped in the hall. "Is it true?" I asked, my voice weak and trembling. I didn't look at him. I stared at my hands. Austin didn't ask what I meant. He knew. "Tisa, look at me," he said softly. It took effort to raise my head. There was no anger in his eyes. No offense at my doubt. Just deep, infinite sadness, the kind only a father could have. "Come with me," he said. He led me into his study, a large room lined with bookshelves from floor to ceiling. He walked to a heavy painting on the wall and slid it aside. Behind it was a safe. He entered a code, turned the handle, and opened it with a soft click. He didn't pull out cash or documents for his factories. He took out a thin cardboard folder, plain, like the kind used for school papers. He placed it gently on the desk in front of me. "Your mother foresaw this too," he said quietly. "She knew what Dan was capable of. She asked me to keep this, just in case. In case he ever tried to use her death against me. Or against you. I opened the folder. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. Some written in my mother's familiar, delicate handwriting. Others in Austin's firm, steady script. Their correspondence from the last year of her life. I began to read. The first letters were filled with both joy and sadness, joy that they had found each other again after so many years, and sadness that time was slipping away too quickly. Then came the letters about her illness. My mother wrote about the pain, that terrible, all-consuming pain that left her unable to sleep, eat, or think. She said the doctors had given up, that even the strongest painkillers no longer worked. She was turning into a vegetable, losing her clarity of mind, fading away in a narcotic fog. I don't want Issa to see me like this, she wrote. I don't want her last memory of me to be a helpless, suffering shell. I just want a few more weeks. Just a few weeks of clear mind, to talk to her, to prepare her, to say goodbye with dignity. And then Austin's reply. He wrote that he had found an experimental clinic. They were developing a new, very powerful painkiller. It didn't cure, it didn't prolong life, it simply erased pain completely, restoring clarity of mind for a short time. But there was a terrible side effect, it weakened the heart, speeding up the inevitable end. It was a desperate, risky choice, between months of slow decline in agony and confusion, or a few lucid but short weeks. And then the last letter. Written in my mother's trembling hand. Austin, my dear, my only one. Please, get me that medicine. It's my choice. I want to go on my own terms. I want to look into my daughter's eyes one last time while I'm still myself, not a shadow. I understand the risk. I accept it. Promise me you'll do this. And promise me you'll take care of my Tisa when I'm gone. I finished reading. Tears fell onto the yellowed paper. It wasn't proof of murder. It was proof of love. The strongest, purest, most selfless love. The love of a mother who sacrificed time so her daughter would remember her clearly. And the love of a man who carried out the last, hardest wish of the woman he'd loved all his life. Dan hadn't lied, he'd just taken the truth, smeared it with filth, turned an act of love into an act of cruelty. It was his final, lowest blow. But it failed. I looked up at Austin, my father, and all the pain, all the dirt, all the betrayals of the past days suddenly felt so small, so meaningless compared to the truth I now held in my hands. I had survived everything. I had walked through hell. And I had come out the other side, free. The next morning, the small conference room of the hotel where the gala had taken place was packed with journalists. They had been summoned for an emergency press conference. They expected a scandal, some sensational details. At exactly 11, I entered the room. I was dressed in a dark business suit. A small bandage covered my forehead. Austin walked beside me. We took our seats at the table set up before dozens of cameras and microphones. I spoke first. "Good afternoon," I said. My voice was steady, calm. "Last night, right here in this hotel, you witnessed the end of a very ugly personal story. I won't repeat the details. My ex-husband, his mother, and my sister will face justice. The investigation is already underway." I paused, letting that sink in. "But that's not why I called you here today. I don't want to talk about myself. I want to talk about my mother's legacy, about her foundation. What happened yesterday made me see its mission in a new light." I straightened up and looked directly into the cameras. "Starting today, the Henny Sisley Foundation is changing its focus. Yes, we'll continue supporting hospitals and orphanages. But from now on, our main mission will be to help women. Women who find themselves in situations like mine. Women suffering from domestic violence, not only physical, but also financial. Women whose money, homes, and dignity have been taken from them. Women who are called insane to silence their voices." I saw the faces of the journalists change. They had expected gossip, and instead, they got a declaration. "Our foundation will provide free legal aid to such women. The best lawyers. We'll offer them temporary shelter, psychological support. We'll fight for each one of them just as my father, I turned to Austin, who gave me a small, proud smile, fought for me. I'll use my story, the wreckage of my broken life, not for revenge, but to build something strong. A fortress for those who are weaker. My personal victory means nothing unless it becomes a shield for others. I finished. For a few seconds, there was silence. And then someone started clapping. Then another. And another. Within moments, the entire room was on its feet, applauding. I looked at them and, for the first time in what felt like forever, I smiled. Not a forced, bitter smile, a real one. The kind my mother wore in that photograph on her gravestone. My inheritance wasn't in money. It wasn't the country house. It was in her strength. In her love. And that day, at last, I truly claimed it. That was a difficult, heavy, but, I think, deeply meaningful story, dear listeners. A story about how, in a single day, a person's entire world can collapse into pieces, and yet, within those broken fragments, they can find the strength to build something new, something stronger and more real than before. You know, when I finished reading this story, I couldn't stop thinking about it. On one hand, Tisa is clearly the victor. She didn't just survive, she reclaimed her life. She was reborn. She became strong, confident, found her father, and discovered a new purpose. But on the other hand, at what cost? And that's what I'd really like to hear your thoughts about. Do you think she was right to expose everything so publicly at the gala? Was it an act of justice? Or was it revenge, deserved, perhaps, but still brutal? Could she have chosen another way? And if so, would it have been worth it? And what about the other characters? Did they deserve their fate? Of course, what Dan and Hannah did is beyond forgiveness. But maybe some of you think the punishment for Lucille was too harsh. Or was it exactly what she deserved? I'd really love to discuss this with you. Maybe you still have questions about the story? Maybe some detail struck you, or something didn't quite make sense. Please, share your thoughts in the comments below the video. I read all of them with great interest. If this story moved you, if it made you feel or think about something important, please support our channel, give this video a like, subscribe if you haven't yet, and of course, tell us what you think in the comments. Your support means the world to us. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones. Be kind to those around you, and always trust your heart. Wishing you all the very best. At the end of this video, a small window will appear in the middle of the screen. Click on it to watch more of our most captivating stories.